It had been 5 years since Nathan first held the pencil in his hand, and in that time, he had become something of a legend. Stories of the eraser had spread across cities, whispered in the streets and in the corners of darkened taverns. People spoke of him with awe and fear, as if he were more than just a man, but some kind of myth made flesh, a figure who could erase your worst nightmares, your deepest regrets, or even your very existence. Nathan stood atop a hill overlooking the city, watching as the sun set behind the skyline. His pencil rested in the breast pocket of his long coat, the eraser now noticeably smaller, no longer the pristine pink nub it had once been. He had used the pencil sparingly in the last few months, but even still, it was shrinking. The end was inevitable, and the weight of that realization grew heavier with every passing day. Nathan's reputation as a hero, or a savior, brought him into contact with people from every walk of life, those desperate for a second chance, those seeking to forget their darkest moments, and those who simply wanted someone else to fix the mistakes they could not. And while Nathan had started his journey with the noble intention of helping those in need, he had quickly learned that his power was as much a curse as it was a gift. It began with small requests. A woman asking for the memory of her abusive husband to be erased, so she could move on with her life. A father asking for his son's nightmares to vanish, so the child could sleep peacefully. Nathan granted those requests, erasing the past for them, and each time, the pencil's eraser grew smaller. But over time, the requests grew larger, more complex, more dangerous. People sought Nathan not just to erase memories or fears, but to erase entire events, people, or histories. And as the erasures became more significant, so too did the moral weight of Nathan's choices. One evening, a man had come to him with an impossible request. Erase the existence of a corrupt politician who had plunged the city into poverty and despair. Erase him, the man said, and the city will be saved. People will have hope again. Nathan had stared at the man for a long time, his mind swirling with the implications of such an act. Erasing a person wasn't something he took lightly. In the past, he had erased objects, memories, and even creatures of the night, but a living, breathing person? It felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he could come back from. I can't do that, Nathan had finally said. The man had looked at him with disappointment, anger simmering in his eyes. You're supposed to be a hero, he spat. But you're just like everyone else, afraid to do what needs to be done. As the man left, Nathan felt the familiar weight of doubt settle on his shoulders. What kind of hero am I? Despite the growing requests, Nathan hadn't been entirely alone in his journey. Ezekiel, the former soldier turned vigilante, had stayed by his side through it all. The two had developed an unspoken bond. Ezekiel was the sword to Nathan's eraser, a man who acted as a protector for Nathan when the physical dangers of the world grew too great. But Ezekiel carried his own burden. Even though Nathan had refused to erase his memories of the past, the soldier's guilt remained ever present. It was in the lines of his face, the tension in his muscles, the way he sometimes stared off into the distance with hollow eyes. You still think about it, don't you? Nathan asked one night, as the two of them sat by a campfire just outside the city. The flames flickered between them, casting shadows across their faces. Ezekiel didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire for a long time, his jaw clenched, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Every day, Ezekiel finally admitted. I relive it, the day I hesitated. The day my men died because I wasn't fast enough. Nathan nodded, understanding the weight of regret all too well. I could still erase it, you know, he offered. Though he knew what Ezekiel's answer would be. No, Ezekiel said firmly, his voice hard as steel. I told you before, I need to carry this. I have to face it. You can't erase everything, Nathan. Some things need to stay. Nathan didn't press the issue. He respected Ezekiel's choice, even if he didn't fully understand it. And yet, in his heart, Nathan knew that Ezekiel was right. Erasing pain didn't always lead to peace. Sometimes it only created more emptiness. Lila, the dreamer and artist who had once sought to erase her own isolation, had also stayed in Nathan's life. She had become something of a confidant, offering him solace in the rare quiet moments between the chaos of his duties as the eraser. Lila was the only person who seemed to truly understand the weight he carried. And though she could not bear it for him, her presence was a comfort. One night, as they sat together in her studio, surrounded by her vibrant paintings, Lila spoke softly. Her voice like the brushstrokes of her art, delicate and full of meaning. People see you as a hero, she said. Her eyes fixed on one of her latest works, a painting of a lone figure standing before a wall of shadows, the pencil in hand. But I think you're more than that. You're not just here to erase what's bad. You're here to remind people of what's good. Nathan looked at her, puzzled. What do you mean? Lila smiled faintly. You've spent so much time trying to take away pain, fear, and suffering. But have you ever thought about what would happen if you didn't? If you let people face their demons, their regrets? Maybe that's how they grow. Nathan had never thought of it that way before. He had always assumed that erasing what hurt people was the right thing to do. But what if erasing those things only made people weaker? What if it robbed them of the chance to heal on their own? Lila's words stayed with him, echoing in his mind long after he had left her studio that night. As Nathan continued his work, the weight of his decisions grew heavier. He had become more selective in the things he erased, more cautious. The pencil's eraser was no longer just a tool, it had become a symbol of his own mortality. Every time he used it, he inched closer to the day when the eraser would be gone, and with it, his immortality. But even more than that, Nathan began to doubt the very nature of his power. Was he truly helping people? Or was he simply giving them an easy way out? The city that had once looked up to him now seemed to rely on him too much. Every problem, every fear, every mistake, people came to him, asking for erasure. And with each request, Nathan's doubts grew. One day, a woman came to him with a plea that shook him to his core. She was a widow, her face lined with grief and loss, her eyes hollow from crying. She begged Nathan to erase the memory of her husband's death. She couldn't live with the pain anymore. She wanted it gone, as if it had never happened. Nathan stared at her, the pencil heavy in his hand. I don't know if I can do that, he said, his voice faltering. The woman's face crumpled, and she sobbed, falling to her knees. Please, she cried, please. I can't keep living like this. Nathan's heart ached for her. He wanted to help, he wanted to ease her pain. But he couldn't shake the feeling that erasing the memory would do more harm than good. If he erased the memory, would she also erase the love she had for her husband? Would she forget the joy he had brought into her life? Could he take that away from her, even if it meant removing her suffering? For the first time since he had received the pencil, Nathan hesitated. As Nathan walked away from the widow's home, his mind was in turmoil. The weight of being a hero had never felt so crushing. He had the power to erase anything, but that power had come with a cost not just to him, but to those he had tried to help. He had started this journey believing that he could make the world a better place by erasing its pain, its suffering, its mistakes. But now, he wasn't sure anymore. Maybe Lila was right, maybe people needed to face their pain in order to grow. Nathan stopped at the edge of a bridge, looking down at the river below. The pencil in his hand felt heavier than ever. The eraser now worn down to half its original size. How many more times could he use it before it was gone? How many more decisions would he have to make, knowing that each one carried the weight of someone's life, their memories, their very existence? As the sun set over the horizon, Nathan made a silent vow to himself. He would not erase lightly. He would not take the easy path. He would only erase when there was no other choice. But the weight of that vow hung heavy on his shoulders. For Nathan Cole, the eraser, being a hero wasn't about